they're empowered to, they have enough of an understanding that they can actually have practical tools to go home and build on what they started together here, and then that they go home and share it with others. Because the more people that are doing this type of work with their horses, it gets more people interested in it, and then this stuff grows. So that's my goal with what we do here.
You are listening to the Horse Radio Network, part of the Equine Network family.
Welcome to The Ride, a bi-weekly podcast brought to you by Horse and Rider Magazine, co-hosted by Nichole, Chirico, and Devin, Conley. In each episode, we chat with some of the industry's top trainers, clinicians, horsekeeping experts, and professionals to share inspiring stories, training philosophies, and the importance of living your best Western horse life. This episode of The Ride is brought to you by SmartPak. Even the best cared for horse can colic, but you don't have to go through it alone. With Colic Care by SmartPak, your horse gets daily comprehensive hindgut support, and you get up to $15,000 in colic surgery reimbursement. Give your horse the best care possible and receive your own peace of mind in return. Choose Colic Care and enroll now by calling 1-800-461-8898 or visiting smartpak.com/colicare. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Ride. This is Nichole. I'm here with my co-host, Devin, and today we have a special guest on our podcast. I actually got a chance to watch him at the Denver Stock Show in the Freestyle Reining and was so incredibly impressed with his run that I knew that we had to have him on the podcast so I could learn more about that run and him in general. So today we have Luke Gingerich on. He is a professional based out of Plain City, Ohio, where he specializes in reining, liberty horsemanship, and relationship-based training. He's a reserve American Quarter Horse Congress champion in the freestyle reining, and he has performed at some of the top Equine Expo events and reining freestyles in the country, including the Stock Show reining here in Denver that is very, very prestigious and well loved. So thank you, Luke, for coming on and talking with us. We're so excited to have you on.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm really excited to be here with you guys. Appreciate you having me on the show.
So before we kind of talk about some of the stuff you're currently doing in your riding career, can we kind of go back to the beginning so that people who maybe aren't as familiar with you can learn a little bit more about your background, how you've got involved with horses, that kind of journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So I did not come from a horse family, actually, whatsoever. I'm the only person in my immediate family that's has any interest in horses. My grandfather did have horses. So growing up, when we went to their place, I got to, be around the ponies. And I think that's where I got a lot of my love for animals in general, but specifically horses. And then I basically proceeded to beg my parents for a pony ever since I was very young. And finally, when I was 10, I think I was 10 years old, they caved and bought me my first little mini. And quickly, I quickly outgrew my mini, and then they bought me a bigger pony. And it was, I did not. I was fortunate that we had the land here that my father was able to build a barn out in the backyard, put up some pasture. So that was super cool to have my horses here at home. But that also meant I didn't have kind of the community of, say, being at a boarding barn or being somewhere like that. For a number of reasons, I didn't show in, say, 4-H or anything like that. And then combine that with being a young boy into horses. There's not a whole lot of us doing that. And so the horses really were my escape. So I didn't have access to a lot of hands-on learning and knowledge. So I learned a lot through training videos. So Christmas gifts, birthday gifts, I would ask for training videos, and I'd sit down and watch videos, and I'd go out and basically play with things and experiment. And I quickly learned it didn't happen as easily when I did it myself as it looked on the training videos. But largely self-taught in the beginning. And then I was drawn to the Liberty work, and I started doing some of that with my own horse. And people over time started asking me to start teaching it. And I was kind of like, well, I don't teach it. I just do it, So then I had to relearn it because I was just doing it because I loved it. And anybody, I think, who has who teaches professionally would say, would agree, there's a very big difference in doing something yourself and then learning how to teach it to somebody else. And so that was definitely a process, but that's kind of how, I definitely did not just set out to go down the path where I'm on today, specifically, but that's kind of how one thing led to another, and here we are.
Well, because you competed a couple times as a non-pro in the reining freestyle at the American Quarter Horse Congress before going into the professional division. So was that kind of how you transitioned over? Is like people just kept asking you for help and advice and training, and then you were like, well, I guess this is what I'm going to do? Or was it always like kind of the plan to go from the non-pro division and then become a professional and start going into the open stuff and doing that kind of stuff?
Yeah, that's a good question. I did start out as a non-pro, and it was a personal goal that I dreamed of showing in the freestyle, and so I just wanted to do it and dreamed of riding bridleless and competing in the reining. And I would say I kind of dreamed of doing something in the horse industry some way, but I didn't see any clear path that felt really realistic. For example, I'm a very much an introvert. I was very uncomfortable around people. You couldn't pay me enough to do any kind of public speaking. I didn't like to travel and didn't like to, be in the spotlight or be in high pressure situations, which what I do now requires that I do all of those things. So, was not necessarily something I was seeking out specifically, but yeah, like you said, people, I started doing shows with my own horse, and people were, interested in it and asked if I would start sharing it. And so I was like, well, we'll start. I started with some demos and some private coaching and teaching, and then that turned into clinics and traveling for clinics, and went from there. So
that's very cool. I was going to say, yeah, now you have to do all of those things, and you're doing them so well.
I always say, at least for me anyway, it's amazing what people will do for horses. I was just teaching a clinic here last weekend at my place, and the topic came up about something, and I had mentioned something, and I said, well, to clarify, I'm just saying, like, the comment I had made, like, it never ceases to amaze me what a person will do for their horse. They won't do it for anybody else, maybe, but they'll do it for horses. And it's amazing what they help us kind of overcome, and the growth that I think they can help us experience.
Absolutely. Yeah. They're a great motivator, and like something that I feel like really brings a lot of people out of their shell. So I totally can empathize with that. So, as we mentioned before, you incorporate a lot of liberty training into your riding, and, teaching and training and things of that nature. One, can you just kind of touch on, for those who aren't familiar with liberty training, like what's the end goal with that first? And then what really got you into the liberty work? What does that mean to you?
So, getting into the liberty work, I'm a detail-oriented person, and I'm also a relational person. And so, when I was getting into the horse world, and I've learned very quickly to do any kind of liberty work, you have to be able to pay attention to small details, reading your horse, your own body language, all of those little pieces. And I wanted my horses to want to be with me as much as I wanted to be with them. I wanted it to be, a back and forth. And I remember back, it was many years ago. I think it was the first year a friend of mine took me to Fantasia at Equine Fair, the night show there. And I don't even know who it was. There was this big black horse, this guy in the spotlights doing liberty work. And I thought it was beautiful, and being able to see the flow and the, to me, it comes down to, it should feel like a dance with your horse, Now there's a lot of steps that go into it before it feels beautiful and pretty, But as far as the end goal, to me, I want to be able to communicate with my horse at a high level without any physical restraints. So that's where the liberty work comes in. But I still want to be able to, I'm directing their thoughts and their movements in a refined, connected way. And the end goal, like I said, is for me, so it should feel like a beautiful dance where we're mentally connected, but my horses are also physically using themselves in a powerful, athletic way that allows them to be disciplined and controlled, but also express themselves and their emotions and their individual personalities. Because different of my horses definitely excel in different areas, and so I think the beauty of the Liberty work is we have a little more freedom to. If I notice a strength in one area, I can let that horse capitalize on that. If I notice a weakness, maybe I don't spend so much time working on that area. And it's really cool to see how each of their personalities come out in that way.
Was there anyone that kind of helped guide you in this journey? I feel like you had mentioned that you kind of relied on videos and articles and stuff like that to kind of help you as a kid with your training career. But I feel like maybe there's not as much information out there in the Liberty training as there is probably in the performance horse or the natural horsemanship kind of stuff. Was there anybody that kind of helped introduce you to it, or has it kind of been a figure it out yourself kind of thing?
Definitely. I back in, I believe it was 2015, I got connected with a horseman by the name of James Cooler. I connected with him through the Road to the Horse competition down in Lexington. He was a competitor there, and I saw that he did some Liberty work and was able to meet him there. Super nice guy, very talented horseman, and he was super helpful. He allowed me to. I hadn't been able to really find up until that point anybody who was doing the things I was wanting to do, and especially combining, like we talked about, the relationship-based training with also performance type work. I found often it was one end of the spectrum or the other end of the spectrum, but it was hard to find a middle ground. So I finally connected with him. I thought he was down in Hilton Head Island, South Carolina at the time. I thought he was going to be coming up to Ohio for some clinics, and that fell through, and I was desperate. And so long story short, I loaded up my horse in my little old bumper pole trailer and my F-150, and we hauled down to Hilton Head Island. We stayed down there for a week, and he really helped me get an understanding of the foundation and gave me something to even build on. And I jokingly yet seriously say he taught me just enough to make me dangerous, because I came back home and I was hooked, and I had enough that now I could experiment with things and build on that. And then I got to work with him off and on beyond that since then somewhat, for at least a couple years after that. And then the other two people who are definitely my biggest, most influential mentors and coaches would be Jesse and Stacy Westfall. So most people are familiar with who they are. Stacy was certainly an inspiration for me with the freestyle reining that I wanted to pursue. And then I was able to start riding with them back in 2017, and they have been, for sure, their influence on my overall outlook and philosophy on horsemanship, and like I said, combining the relationship-based training with a high level of performance. They have been so influential to me in that way because they model that, and they've been doing it for a long time. And I have the most respect for them and how they work with their horses, how they treat people, and just the way they live their lives. So they've been a big influence on me.
We just had Stacy on the podcast a few weeks
really?
ago. So yeah, we love her too. She's awesome.
That's
and
awesome.
Oh my gosh, like the iconic, we were talking about the iconic, freestyle run, like 2006.
Yeah.
Went down in history.
Absolutely. Unforgettable.
Yes. And so like on that topic with the freestyle reining and, being inspired by Stacy and working with those people, how does the Liberty training help with your performance horse training, especially in regards to the freestyle reining? How do you apply those training techniques?
So, for a starting point, anytime you have, first of all, reining is a discipline that requires a very high level of athleticism and performance. And anytime you have a horse that is confident, trusting, and relaxed, they're able to perform at a higher level of of physical athleticism, right? When that's often what people think about when they think of the reining. Um, but being able to combine the relationship side of that to where, especially if we're wanting to, I usually when I show freestyle, I show bridleless, and so clearly there needs to be a level of trust and understanding there if you want to go in that environment under that kind of pressure. And so that the mental side builds, the connection there, but then a lot of my groundwork also builds on, for example, I can teach a horse how to turn around on the ground at liberty, and I can teach them some of the physical ways that then will transfer over into some of the reining stuff. And then, for me, so in the beginning as well, there aren't a lot of freestyles available out there. The reining is one of the more common ones. And so in the beginning, it was a way where I could even incorporate a little bit of my liberty work into a reining freestyle at the end of, say, my reining pattern. And so that's how I find them complementing each other a bit. Yeah.
How did you get your start in the reining? I mean, it sounds like obviously you have become close with Jesse and Stacy, and they have a history of doing the reining and the reining freestyle. But did the inspiration to show in the reining come before you kind of wanted to do the performance side of it, like the freestyle, the natural horsemanship, that kind of thing? How did you find reining? I mean, you're in Ohio, so you're in the birthplace of reining. So I would imagine it's a pretty familiar event for a lot of people.
Yeah. Yes, it is. So I actually I started more with the Liberty work, and they were kind of going side by side. As I was getting into the Liberty work, I was also getting into the reining, and I was also showing at a lot of ranch shows and the ranch versatility classes, and so a lot of those shows have the ranch reining there. And so I was getting into some of it that way. But again, like largely it was self-taught in the beginning. And the freestyle was a way to, like, music and horses are two of my favorite things, hands down. And so, so when doing the freestyle, I get to combine those two things. And I know with freestyle, often a lot of people have a lot of costumes in freestyle as well. Personally, for me, it's more about the creative, artistic side that I get to bring out with choreographing the routine to the music, and then trying to do that in a way that highlights the horse and rider connection and what they built together. And so that was kind of what attracted me to it. And I was, how they say ignorance is bliss. So I had this goal, and I wanted to show in the freestyle, and I wanted to, that's where I wanted to go. And so in 2016, I decided to enter. Well, previously I had done some smaller freestyles. I did a freestyle reining at, like I said, a ranch show series that summer, but then I entered the Congress freestyle that fall. Was doing it on my own as a non-pro. And it was a little bit, I was definitely a little in over my head. We got through it fine, but there was, you find out, you learn what you don't know, as they say, right? And so, but then it was the following year that I was able to get connected with Jesse and Stacy, and started riding with them. And that's when I really started seeing, more of the dots were connecting for me. And I felt like I was really able to go into being more competitive with it and feel more confident doing that.
That's such a neat journey, and just like very organic, growth. And I just think that's really cool. And on top of everything else that you do, with the reining and the liberty and everything like that, you also incorporate some dressage techniques and maneuvers into your performances, correct? How'd you go about learning that? Like, how does that play into all your other training techniques? It seems like a really natural fit to also incorporate some dressage techniques, but can you talk a little on how that came to be?
It does, absolutely. And so I mentioned previously that I'm a very detail-oriented person, and my fiance is an eventer. And so, there's three phases of eventing, and her favorite is the cross country, and she loves the jumping, and she jokes that like she does the dressage because she has to, because she knows that it benefits. Well, one, it's one of the phases of the sport, but also she knows how much it benefits everything else. But she frequently jokes about she's not as much of a detail-oriented person, and dressage is challenging for her. And so anybody I think who has done dressage would agree, like it is a high level of detail. And so honestly, a lot of what I do with my horses is based on what feels balanced to me, what feels soft, what feels like it's improving their understanding or how they're carrying themselves. And so some of the basic dressage principles, I was experimenting with them before I was technically taught what they were, or I maybe didn't even know what the proper terminology was. So I was playing with something, and that improved whatever I was working towards with my horse. And then later I would find out like there's actually a term for that, be that haunches in, shoulder in, half pass. And of course, in the beginning, there's a very, I didn't have it all perfectly correct, but I was experimenting with what it was doing for my horses. And then, like I said, Jesse and Stacy Westfall, I work with them a lot, and the emphasis they put on a solid foundation, no matter what direction you want to go with the horse, including the dressage work. I've definitely learned a lot about advancing my dressage work by working with them and seeing how I can refine it and how it can tie into the other things I do. And also even learning, I think there's a lot of places where it benefits, let's say, the reining, and the way I use it to build the foundation of the Liberty work. But then it also comes a point where you also need to recognize where there's some differences, and maybe sometimes we need to focus more on the dressage side or focus more on the reining side, because they all have side effects, and while it can benefit each other, it's also a lot. I do Liberty work, dressage, reining, all with the same horse many times, and so it's a lot for them to learn how to transition between the two. Builds a very well-rounded horse, but it also takes a lot of awareness on not overwhelming them with all of the different movements that they're learning to do.
So first of all, I think your fiance is probably in the majority. I don't think I've ever met an eventer that's like, I love the dressage. They all like jump in those obstacles that don't fall down when you hit them.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But I do have to say, I had an opportunity to watch your performance. I mentioned this at the beginning of the show at the National Western Stock Show here in Denver, and you came in and you started trotting in, and your horse looked like a dressage horse, and it caught all of our attention immediately. And half of my barn is Western performance, and the other half is English, and those English girls were like, "Wait, what? They love this." So you were their favorite because they were like, we like the guy that did the dressage stuff. But it was a beautiful performance, and I would imagine it's online somewhere, and I highly recommend to anybody listening if they can find it online to watch it, because it was really, really cool to see how you could incorporate reining and dressage. And I mean, at one point you did a pirouette into a spin. And that was just really cool. So can you kind of talk a little bit about that performance? Because I got to see it in person and I loved it. And I would love to learn more about what went into that particular performance.
Yeah, absolutely. That was, I was just super proud of my mare. Chloe is, she will be coming. I got to get my facts straight here. She would be 7. She's going to be 7 this year. Wow, that took me a minute. But I've had her since she was a 2-year-old, and I was getting into the Liberty work when I got her, and as I was getting ready to start her under saddle in the fall of her 2-year-old year, I had been thinking about just wondering how it would go if I were to try. I wanted to see how much I love the Liberty work and for what it is as a standalone, but I also really want it to be like I've alluded to multiple times, but I do think it's really important to bridge the gap between liberty work or relationship-based training and competitive or performance work. And so I wanted to see how much of this can actually transfer over to riding in a practical way. And so I was curious if I were to start her totally bridleless without any headgear. And it was going to be a quick experiment, like make sure we could get through it unscathed, and then I was going to go to regular tack, and I wanted to compete with her. And long story short, it massively surpassed my expectations of how much was going to transfer over. After a week of riding, she looked like a horse with months of riding, because she had, so much time on the ground and so much understanding of the mental side of things, and then also the physical muscle memory and how to carry herself. And so what turned into now, however many years later this was, I started her at the end of 21. We're now in 24. I'm sorry, that was the end of 19 that I started her. I'm getting my dates all mixed up. But I have ridden her exclusively bridleless. She does not know what headgear means, whether that's, any type of rope or reins or halter while riding. And so that I have nothing against headgear or bridles or bits. I think there's very beneficial ways to use them. This was a personal challenge for me. That every time we figured something else out, I kept asking myself, well, what if I now go to regular bridle and headgear, I'm going to wonder if we could have, solved that puzzle without it. And I tell people, I don't stay bridleless with her because I think it's, I have anything against headgear or bridles or bits, like I said, but I think it gets people to see things that they otherwise would not see, right? I think it gets them to look at things in a different way and just think about things differently. So all that to say, that has really limited my ability to compete with her, because almost every discipline will not allow you to show bridleless. And so the freestyle has been one of the few ways that we can do that. And so it's a huge honor to be invited to come out there. And obviously a huge undertaking to travel all the way out there from Ohio. And so we had a bunch of preparation going into it. And this was a new venue for us. And I was super proud of the way she handled, the atmosphere. That's a huge arena there. It's a very big feel. And being able to feel how well she transitioned, for example, going in the trot when we entered, with the movement she was offering. She does not offer that kind of movement unless she's truly relaxed and feeling confident in herself. And so to feel her coming in with that, that's one of the most amazing feelings to me, when I could feel that in spite of what's going on, she could still stay that confident in what we're asking for. And transitioning from the reining to the dressage maneuvers is super challenging. And so one of my favorite parts of the whole routine was, we had done our fast circles. We were coming down into our small slow. And I knew I was planning to, along with the music, I'm out of the small slow and then transition into the pirouette. And we weren't even totally in the pirouette, and people saw it coming, and they just went crazy. Just to see that to feel that they could see what was coming and how hard she was trying. And then as I went back and watched the video, one of my most favorite parts was, as she started to build into that pirouette, she, we were just doing our thing. And then she was like, what you could see in her face when everybody went wild, her ears were like, what? But then the other ear can flip back like, okay, but you don't think this is a big deal. So she just seeing, those are the kind of things that I love seeing, their expression when, there's nothing holding her there. And that's a lot of environmental pressure going on, but seeing the ability to acknowledge, what would have been pretty spooky to a lot of horses, but still commit to what we were doing. And then, being able to just transition into the spin and feel so good about herself. I was super happy with her. And then also, since we don't get to show frequently with staying bridleless, the ground there was definitely different than what she's been used to in the past for stopping. And so I was just super proud of her for how well she adapted. We had to make some pretty significant adaptations Saturday night when we were schooling. and I had to really be careful to keep her confidence up. So I toned some things down in her stops, and the way she adjusted and still tried super hard for me was just, I'm super proud of her, and really appreciate the opportunity to be out there, and had a ton of fun doing it.
I mean, that like it's hard to even put words to this, because what you did with her as such a young horse and starting her that way is so impressive and incredible. And I feel like all of us who grew up like loving horses, we all had those dreams, right? Of like riding bareback and bridleless through the field, and you're like living those dreams as an adult. That's so cool. So people, people listening to this right now, that are hearing this and going like, oh my gosh, that's incredible. I can't wait to watch that video. Or maybe they saw you down there and maybe they want to try some Liberty work at home. What do you recommend are the first steps that somebody should take? I mean, obviously, like, I feel like we have to put a disclaimer, like, don't try this at home. Like, don't start your 2-year-old under Liberty if you don't know what you're doing. Like, Luke is a professional. But what do you recommend as a first few steps to take?
Well, and that's a good question. And we naturally tend to see the physical, the maneuvers, the exciting things. Those are the easy things to see. And that, for example, somebody wants to go do Liberty circles with their horse, or somebody wants to, it's always somebody wants to teach their horse to rear. And ironically, that's one of the last things I'll ever teach anybody's horse to do is rear, for obvious reasons. Like safety always has to be first. And that's physical safety is important with that. And also that's a very high energy maneuver that can actually, like, teaching. Rearing is usually associated with a lot of negative emotions in a horse when they do it not on cue. So to teach it on cue without triggering those negative emotions, like, that's a big, big thing. So not to get off topic here, but the point is, I always try to encourage people to, it all starts with awareness to me. And it all starts with, before we can get to a lot of the physical things, we need to connect with the mental side. And so to me, it all starts with connection, focus, and relaxation. I mean, is your horse, are they even focused on you? Because if they're not focused, it's going to be very apparent. If you're going to work offline at Liberty or bridleless, if they're not focused, the body goes where the mind goes. So if the mind is not there, the body will soon be gone, right? But I always, am working with people on, they're so quick to point out when their horse isn't focused on them. And yet most times it's stemming from the fact that the person isn't even aware, first of all, of themselves. And then the person isn't aware of what happens before the big displays of lack of focus happens. There's a lot happening before your horse is actually pulling away from you, causing a big fuss, and even low level. Like, we have to be aware of those little signs and then be willing to consistently redirect their focus back to us. And then as we start working on things, pay attention to, are they feeling confident about it? Are they a little tense? Are they worried about something? And so being aware that as we're going through steps, we're guiding them back to a place of relaxation. And, really basic, like, can my horse stand relaxed in the middle of any arena on a slack lead rope, paying attention to me without me touching them or their face? Like, that sounds pretty basic, but it's actually relatively rare that I see that when I first start working with somebody. And so once we have that baseline, then we can go into basic body control. With Liberty, we have the relationship side of it, and then we have the technique side of it. And I think you have to understand that there's both sides of it. So if you don't take the time to build a relationship with your horse, I have quite a bit of technique, but if I jump in with a bunch of technique and I don't have time to build that, rapport with your horse, we're only going to get so far. At the same time, if you don't have a certain amount of technique, which to me is communication, you're only going to get so far with the relationship side of things. Because good communication equals better relationships. And so we need to build it from the ground up. Basic body control. I mean, how do we talk to each part of our horse's body? Can we ask them to back away from us? Can we ask them to move their hindquarter, move their shoulder, move their whole body laterally in a side pass? Are we, and then the biggest thing too is becoming aware of drive and draw with our body language. So if we're trying to get beyond the physical restraint, and physical aids, we have to learn how to incorporate drive and draw when we're asking our horse to send away from us, when we're drawing them towards us, and being creative about how we're asking for those movements without being, the halter and lead needs to become, at the end goal, the last thing we go to instead of the first thing we go to. So that's, like you said, that's a big topic, but hopefully that at least gives some ideas to play around with and think about to start out.
So a common thread that I'm kind of hearing as we talk, you talk about confidence a lot, but not confidence as a rider, confidence in as like the horse's aspect. And I think we talk a lot about being a confident rider, but we kind of forget about making sure our horse is confident too. And that seems to be a really big aspect of your training. Whether you're talking about going to Denver and your horse trotting in like she did because of her confidence, or her being confident in her ability to continue doing what she's doing even when the crowd's exploding with noise, and then just talking about introducing your horse to Liberty and how their confidence really matters. Can you kind of talk a little bit about that relationship based training and how you kind of help your horse gain the confidence that he needs?
Yeah, and I think so. In the beginning, confidence comes from learning that they're being listened to. Like, anytime you could tell somebody's truly listening to what you have to say, it builds trust. Now, it doesn't mean the other person has to always agree with what you say, but if they're listening and they're holding space for that. So in the beginning, that comes down to the awareness side of things. And with the Liberty work, you have no choice but to break things down into very small, attainable steps. Because if you overwhelm them, they will leave. They will choose not to participate because they don't understand. And so one thing I love about it is it holds the person very accountable. And then you have to break things down. So that in and of itself builds confidence when things are broken down into small steps, which oftentimes means it does take longer to achieve the end goal. But in my experience, it's much more solid when you get to the end goal. And it enhances the relationship because of the way it's been built. And then the other thing that I try to talk about is, we all, we talked about, childhood dreams of riding bareback and bridleless, and we want it to be dreamy and magical and just feel amazing all the time. And there is certainly times where it does feel that way, but it also, there's a lot of practical aspects that go into that. And so when you referred to, the pressure of a show environment, like, sometimes people think Liberty work is a way to get away from using pressure when we're training our horses, right? And while there may be some styles of Liberty work that do kind of go more that direction, personally, I don't do Liberty work to avoid using any pressure. Like, I don't believe that's beneficial or healthy for our horses in the world that we live in. But I do this work to change how, when, and why I use pressure, to give my horses a more well-rounded and confident and connected understanding of it, because I think that sets them up for more success in every area of their lives, whether we're showing or performing and whatever we're doing. And so a practical example of this, because it's easy to talk theory, it's a little more difficult to talk practical, when you're actually at home in the barn training. But a practical example is, I have whips that I use in my Liberty training that is an extension of my body. It makes my body longer. I can be more accurate, and I can clarify things. And so we all know you can apply pressure with the whip, but a whip can be, so if I ask somebody, referring to riding, some people view their hands and their legs when they're riding as corrections to punish their horse when they make a mistake. Or other people would view their hands and their legs as supportive aids to communicate with and clarify and guide their horse into what they're asking them to do, how to use their body, how to find relaxation, how to find focus, all of those things. The same thing can apply on the ground. You can use a rope, a whip, a flag, any of those things. You can use that as a correction to punish your horse when they made a mistake, or you can use that as a supportive aid to show them the answer, to clarify things, to guide them through things. And I can, if I apply pressure to enhance something that's happening, to use their body in a better way, to enhance something versus waiting until I don't like what's happening, and then I jump in with pressure to correct them, it changes their association around it. And so over time, and that gets incorporated into, a big focus for me is emotional control, teaching my horses how to operate at varying level of emotions. So if we incrementally during training, if I intentionally bring their emotions higher, even to a slightly anxious state sometimes, when I know that I can then right after that show them how to come back down to a relaxed state, over time they learn how to be able to fluctuate between those and stay relaxed when they're in a high, their adrenaline is high, right? And along that process, they learn that my energy or my pressure can come up in order to match what's going on in the environment. So when we go into a show situation, the environmental pressure really comes up, right? And so if I can come up to match that, it helps them relax under pressure versus thinking anytime pressure comes up, they're in trouble and it's going to be a scary thing. That's kind of a long answer, but I hope that clarifies a little bit.
So, I mean, it sounds like the relationship-based training really does help prepare your horses for the show pen, your performance horses for the show pen. And by like you said, it's not that you're removing pressure, you're helping them adjust and regulate their emotions and respond better to these situations. So is that something that you implement with all of your performance horses?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Very cool. Yeah. So you're also a very much in-demand clinician. What is your goal when you're working with a horse and rider team in a clinic environment? Can you touch a little bit on what that looks like?
Yeah. So I get people from all over the country, all different backgrounds, English, Western, literally all over the spectrum, all different breeds of horses, ages of horses, types. And so it's always interesting to see the different people that come for clinics. And I used to travel a lot for clinics all over the country. And now I primarily focus on more in-depth in what I call intensive clinics. So either 5-day or 10-day clinics here at my facility in Ohio, where mostly people come to me now. And a big reason for that was, one, as I'm getting my horses ready for shows, it's harder to prepare them when I'm traveling and on the road a lot and in different places where it's sometimes hard to school. But a big thing was it's difficult to go in depth with people in 2 or 3 days, and so when I'm traveling in different places and I'm there for 2 or 3 days and I'm gone, and many times I don't see that person or horse again for a very long time, it's difficult to feel like we get far enough that I think they actually can maintain the progress and be successful moving forward, which I don't think that serves then anybody in the situation, me or the person or the horse. And so by having these intensive clinics here at my place, my biggest goal, I want them to, we have the time frame and the format, because I keep the groups small, that I can adjust to each person and horse wherever they're at. Everybody doesn't have to be at the same stage. Everybody doesn't have to progress at the same speed. And so if somebody else is farther along than you are, you get to see a step farther along in the process, which is helpful. And many times, even people that are farther along, they say, from watching people that are maybe a little earlier, they are reminded of or pick up on things that they missed earlier on. And so I like that it can be very customizable. And my goal is that, no matter what your background is, what type of horse you have, you come here, you feel welcome, you feel understood, you feel valued, even if you don't do things all the right way. It's so interesting. Like I said, we don't have all a certain type that show up. And it's cool to see, I'll have 6 people show up, complete strangers, on Sunday night. And by Friday evening, usually middle of the week already, they're all planning, like, we need to figure out a time to all come back and do this together again, and their new friendships are made. And it has a very much a community feel to it, which I think is really cool. And I'm able to get to know the people and the horses better, which in turn helps me help them get farther. But my goal is that they not only learn from their sessions, but from watching the other participants, and that they leave here feeling, first of all, inspired by seeing what's possible, because horsemanship in general is hard, let alone doing liberty work. And so I'll do demos with my horses in the mornings, and people can watch my sessions with my horses. But then I want them to feel like they're empowered they have enough of an understanding that they can actually have practical tools to go home and build on what they started together here, and then that they go home and share it with others. Because the more people that are doing this type of work with their horses, it gets more people interested in it, and then this stuff grows. So that's my goal with what we do here.
How cool. I really love the idea of doing like an extended clinic for like 5-10 days, because like you said, you're really just kind of touching the tip of the problem or understanding something or whatever it might be. And then, yeah, those people leave and they take what they've learned in your clinic and apply it throughout their riding sessions or groundwork sessions or what it might be. But if they're not able to see you for another couple of months, years, whatever, you're kind of almost starting back at square one to make sure that the horse understands what you need them to do before kind of going to that next step. So how cool to be able to take it into like a 10-day kind of, clinic environment kind of thing and really just kind of get your hands in it.
It is. And once people are here, a lot of people, maybe they think, first of all, they think 5 or 10 days is a long time, and then they get here and they're like, wow, we're on like day 2 or 3. Usually I'd be going home now. We're just barely getting into stuff. And it's so cool to see too, once people come, and often it becomes like at least a yearly thing for them that they're planning ahead to come back. And often even they're coming multiple times a year. And we can come back, especially if they've been here. I find 5 days is a really nice format, because 2 weeks is a long time for the person and the horse and for me. So, but we can get enough going that they feel confident with where they are, and then they can go home and get that solid. Because I do tell people at a certain point, I can't just add new things every day for 2 weeks to you and your horse. There needs to be some time for things to get solid, and then you come back in a few months, and we keep building on that. But yeah, it's really, I find that much more rewarding and productive. I'm not able to work with as many people this way because I have to keep the group smaller and I'm not traveling as much. And that was a concern of mine starting out. But the more I do it, the more I see. I'm always prefer quality over quantity. And so I feel like people actually can leave here being successful, and then they can go home and help people around them, versus feeling like we're doing a lot, being in a different place every weekend if we're traveling, but feeling like it's not super sustainable. So, yeah.
So for those who might be interested in participating in a clinic or learning more about you, or seeing what your schedule is like, if you're going to be at any expos coming up or anything, where can they follow you on social media, online, just to stay up to date with what you're doing?
Mm-hmm. So social media, I'm on Facebook, Luke Gingerich Horsemanship, also on Instagram. And then my website, gingerichhorsemanship.com. We've got our upcoming events on there. You can send us an email if you'd like more information. I have online coaching. I'm working on actually a new platform that I'm planning to launch later this year. And so that's a great resource for people either that maybe are not able to come for a clinic, or where it's most beneficial is when people can come for some in-person learning and then go home and maintain with the online content and build from there.
Awesome. Well, I thoroughly enjoy getting to talk with you and learning more about your philosophy in riding and training techniques and how you apply all these different styles of riding and relationship work to your performances. So thank you so much for coming on and talking with us. I think everybody that's listening to this probably thoroughly enjoyed getting to know more about you and your style of riding.
Absolutely. You're welcome. And I just want to say thank you so much for having me on. It was really a pleasure to speak with both of you, and hopefully we'll get to maybe do it again sometime.
Thank you guys for tuning into the Ride Podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and please be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow Horse and Rider Magazine on social media and find us at horseandrider.com to see all the cool things that we're up to. And if you have any comments or questions, please be sure to hit us up at horseandrider@equinenetwork.com. We want to hear from you guys. And if you like what you're listening to, please be sure to leave us a review on iTunes.